In this podcast episode, Oliver Burkeman delves into why many people find it difficult to live calm, focused, energetic, and meaningfully productive lives, contrasting sharply with the anxious, overwhelmed, and isolated existence many currently endure. He emphasizes that the struggle is not just about external circumstances like an overwhelming workload or societal pressures, but is deeply linked to how we conceptualize the life we aspire to. Too often, individuals frame their ideal existence as something far off in the future, compelling them to constantly strive and postpone joy or peace until some distant then. This future-oriented mindset creates a vicious cycle of deferring happiness, which paradoxically results in anxiety and perpetual dissatisfaction. Burkeman advises a shift in perspective, recognizing that the meaningful life we seek can be partially accessed in the present moment. While acknowledging that modern life is inherently packed with endless tasks and distractions, he encourages the practice of stepping into the life one wants now, rather than waiting endlessly for an elusive plateau of productivity or calm. This approach nurtures a more compassionate and sustainable way of living that balances ambition with acceptance of limits. A key insight shared in the discussion is the importance of self-compassion, particularly as Burkeman navigated his own dislike of the concept due to cultural barriers. He introduces the reverse golden rule, a philosophy from philosopher Ida Landau that urges individuals not to treat themselves worse than they treat others. This reframing resonated deeply with Burkeman, revealing that many people subject themselves to harsh internal criticism that they would never impose on friends or colleagues. This invitation to grant oneself equal kindness serves as an antidote to the common cycle of self-judgment and perfectionism that undermines well-being and meaningful progress. Burkeman's articulation unpacks how self-compassion need not mean indulgence or self-pity, but rather fair treatment. Recognizing the damaging internal narratives that suggest "I need fixing" before worthiness allows for a more grounded, nurturing engagement with oneself and life's challenges. When confronted with the notion that there will always be more tasks than time to complete them, Burkeman affirms this as a fundamental human condition rather than a failing. The key lies in embracing the finite nature of our attention and energy against the backdrop of infinite responsibilities and desires. Far from signaling defeat, this realization frees one from the futile chase to do it all. By accepting that some things inevitably remain undone, people can focus on fewer tasks that truly matter. This principled surrender to limitation is presented as an act of liberation rather than resignation. Burkeman points out that much stress arises from resisting reality and striving to conquer an impossible schedule. Instead, the goal becomes purposeful selection, where the need to do everything is replaced with a conscious acknowledgement of priority and values. This clarity transforms overwhelm into manageable engagement and allows life to gain meaningful shape. Reflecting on the global impact of his previous bestseller, 4,000 Weeks, Burkeman attributes its resonance partially to timing and cultural context. The pandemic had disrupted conventional approaches to productivity and introduced widespread reconsideration of how people manage their finite lives. Burkeman situates his work as a gentle but radical reaffirmation of limits, following earlier waves of advice promising total productivity or complete detachment. His book found fertile ground precisely because it acknowledges ambition and contribution, but disavows the myth that one can master an endless set of demands. Readers were ready for an honest message that neither demands nor escapism alone can provide peace, but rather a relaxed acceptance of human finitude. Like stepping into a rainstorm and deciding to get wet, embracing limits emerged as a refreshing alternative to fruitless resistance. The podcast also explores practical applications of Burkeman's philosophy through the lens of health, weight loss, and habit formation. It is common, as Burkeman and the host both observed, for people to defer happiness until results are achieved, a mindset that can stifle motivation and joy. Instead, doing enjoyable, meaningful things now, regardless of current weight or status, often leads to natural improvements as a secondary effect. This counterintuitive suggestion upends the if-then conditioning that predominates in goal setting. If I lose weight, then I can engage in hobbies or travel. Berkman's perspective underscores the value of integrating pleasure and personal connection into daily living, even while working toward long-term goals. This approach aligns with his broader theme of showing up authentically now rather than postponing fulfillment until success arrives. The conversation brings to light Berkman's nuanced stance on regret, which he characterizes as closely tied to perfectionism. Rather than viewing regrets as mistakes that reveal personal failures, he sees them as inevitable byproducts of a finite life and limited foresight. Regret, in this framing, becomes a signal of having made choices under uncertainty, choices that are vital to growth and learning. By releasing the illusion of a perfect decision process, individuals can cultivate a gentler relationship with themselves and their past actions. Burkeman observes how an obsession with avoiding regret traps people in indecision and fear. Instead, accepting the impossibility of flawless choices extends permission to engage fully in the present, learns from experiences, and embraces imperfection as part of the human condition. Burkeman's personal move from Brooklyn to rural North Yorkshire illustrates many of the book's core ideas in practice. Driven by both intuitive and practical reasons, family ties, reconnection with childhood landscapes, and a desire for a quieter life, the transition reflected a deep attunement to aliveness, a concept he defines as a felt sense of vitality and authenticity in life choices. His reflections emphasize that big decisions rarely yield perfect outcomes. Every option comes with trade-offs and losses. Crucially, he highlights the importance of accepting these downsides, not as failures, but as inherent facets of choice. Recognizing that freedom entails choosing which consequences to bear, rather than seeking risk-free options, allowed Burkeman to relinquish paralysis and self-doubt. This personal vignette supports his broader philosophy of embracing finitude, imperfection, and present engagement over endless calculation. Burkeman discusses the cultural tension between traditional productivity and the deeper ambition toward meaningful, generative work. While rejecting the idea that doing more always equates to better living, he affirms the value of striving for impact and creativity within the boundaries of human limitation. He warns against spiritual or self-help narratives that pitch peace of mind as incompatible with ambition, arguing instead for a balanced life that accommodates both focused achievement and acceptance of constraints. This meaningful productivity reframes productivity not as frantic busyness, but as intentional action oriented by values. Such an approach fosters energy and purpose without burnout or alienation from one's broader life. Burkeman identifies himself as an imperfectionist, embracing the messiness of life while seeking to act with integrity, thus navigating between extremes of overwork and disengagement. Addressing habit formation and self-discipline, Burkeman introduces the concept of Dailyish, a flexible guideline that encourages consistency without rigid perfectionism. Drawing from meditation teacher Dan Harris, he invites listeners to adopt routines that allow for variability, such as practicing 5 or 6 days a week rather than every single day. This approach counteracts the black and white thinking common in habit-forming struggles, where missing one day can result in giving up entirely. Crucially, Burkeman distinguishes between being a servant to rules versus having rules that serve life. The focus shifts from obsessive obedience to a compassionate relationship with practices that support peace of mind and health. This flexible framework enables sustainable change by honoring human variation and fluctuating capacity, while still gently encouraging productive commitment. One of the deeper psychological insights discussed is the culturally ingrained notion that worthwhile things must be hard and effortful, which often leads to a kind of unnecessary suffering. Burkeman challenges this, asking listeners to consider the possibility that framing life's projects as easy or flowing can actually enhance motivation and creativity. He references the concept of choosing an easy world attitude, where challenges are approached with openness rather than resistance. The podcast connects this to the phenomenon that top performers, like athletes, display effort alongside fluidity and presence rather than brute force. By questioning the assumption that effort must equal struggle, Burkeman encourages a gentler, more intelligent engagement that preserves energy and enjoyment. This perspective loosens the grip of perfectionism and opens space for natural, spontaneous action that aligns with one's deeper intentions. A memorable segment centers on how to approach interruptions, especially from loved ones, in the context of daily work and responsibilities. Burkeman shares candid reflections on parenting, highlighting how societal and internal pressures to control one's time can inadvertently make valuable spontaneous moments seem like obstacles. He advocates a gentle redefinition of interruptions, not as enemies to productivity, but as moments of connection that reveal what really matters. He recommends honest, present responses, pausing work to acknowledge others respectfully rather than attempting rigid resistance. This approach reduces conflict, preserves relationships, and often leads to more efficient returns to focus. The conversation also touches on accepting the uncontrollability of life's flow and the wisdom of adapting rather than resisting, thereby transforming potential stress into grace-filled engagement. Closing the thematic journey, Burkeman reflects on Scruffy Hospitality, a principle coined by an Anglican priest which embraces hosting friends and family in imperfect, lived-in homes rather than waiting for flawless conditions. This metaphor extends to broader life attitudes about authenticity and vulnerability. Burkeman explains how striving for polished appearances often erects barriers rather than fostering connection. By allowing oneself to be seen in a more raw, honest light, messy corners, minor flaws, and all, deeper relationships and genuine connections are cultivated. The conversation acknowledges cultural and gendered pressures that often exacerbate perfectionism, but underlines the universal human desire for acceptance without pretense. Burkeman connects this to overcoming imposter syndrome and the liberating power of shared imperfection, emphasizing that real community thrives on authenticity rather than curated facades.